The note was propped against my favorite coffee mug like some twisted greeting card. Holden, I need space to explore other arrangements. The spare key is under the mat for when you're ready to talk like adults. V. Other arrangements. That's what 15 years of marriage gets reduced to in Veda's world. A euphemism that sounds like she's rearranging furniture instead of rearranging her life around another man's schedule. I set my toolbox down and read it again, hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The house felt different, hollow in that particular way that happens when someone's presence gets sucked out all at once. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway, but her shoes were gone from beside the door. The kitchen told the real story. 2 wine glasses in the sink, both with lipstick marks. Either Veda had developed a drinking problem and started wearing 2 shades of red, or she'd been entertaining. The expensive bottle of Pinot Grigio I'd been saving for our anniversary sat empty on the counter, cork discarded carelessly beside it. Classy, Veda, real classy. My voice echoed back from the empty rooms. 15 years of building this life together, and she couldn't even wait until I got home from the Henderson job site to deliver the news in person. Just a note and the lingering evidence of her celebration. I walked through our house, my house now, I supposed, cataloging the missing pieces. Her jewelry box, gone from the bedroom dresser. The fancy coffee maker she insisted we needed vanished from its spot beside the microwave. Half the books from the living room shelves, creating gaps like missing teeth. But she'd left the bills, every single one of them, stacked neatly on the kitchen table beside a calculator and a yellow legal pad covered in her precise handwriting. Mortgage, utilities, credit cards, car payments, all the boring adult stuff that didn't fit into her new arrangement. I sat down and flipped through her calculations. She'd divided everything down to the penny, naturally assuming I'd just go along with whatever she'd decided was fair. The woman who couldn't remember to replace the toilet paper expected me to honor a financial agreement she'd drafted without consulting me. That's when I noticed the letterhead on one of the credit card statements, an address I didn't recognize, in the expensive part of town where the condos had names like Harbor View Estates and Lighthouse Landing. Someone had been getting statements sent to a second address. My phone buzzed. A text from Sam, my old army buddy who ran the garage downtown. Saw Veda at Murphy's last night with some guy in a suit. Thought you should know. Too little too late, Sam. But I appreciated the gesture. I typed back, "Thanks. Already figured it out." The response came immediately. "Need a beer? Need a plan." Same thing. "Murphy's in an hour." I looked around the kitchen one more time at the empty wine bottle and the abandoned bills and the note that started this whole mess. Veda thought she was so smart, orchestrating her exit like some kind of corporate merger. Clean, efficient, no messy emotions or uncomfortable conversations. She'd forgotten one crucial detail about the man she'd been married to for 15 years. I built houses for a living. I understood foundations, load-bearing walls, and what happened when you removed the wrong support beam. Everything came crashing down. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. Joint accounts, all of them, with both our names and signatures required for major transactions. Veda's new arrangement was about to get a lot more expensive. The first transfer was simple, emergency fund to checking. The second one required a phone call to our financial advisor, but Jim had always liked me better than Veda anyway. By the time I finished, every account we'd built together over 15 years was locked down tighter than a submarine hatch. I changed the passwords on everything: Netflix, Amazon, the grocery delivery service she loved so much. Small things, but Veda lived her life through apps and subscriptions. She'd notice. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Then I called the utility companies. Amazing how cooperative they became when you explained that your wife had moved out. and you needed to ensure the bills stayed in your name only. The cable company was particularly helpful, especially when I mentioned that the service address needed to be updated and the premium channels canceled. By the time I left for Murphy's, Veda's new arrangement had lost internet, cable, and the credit cards that funded her lifestyle. The spare key was still under the mat, just like her note promised, but the locks had been changed an hour ago. Let her explore other arrangements from her new friend's couch. Murphy's pub occupied the corner of Main and Harbor like it had grown there, all weathered brick and neon beer signs that flickered when the wind picked up. Sam was already at our usual table, 2 pints waiting, and that look on his face that meant he'd been thinking. "So," he said as I sat down, "want to tell me what really happened? Or should I keep pretending I believe that text about already figuring it out?" Veda left, found herself a new arrangement. I took a long pull from my beer. Guy with a suit and a condo in Harbor View Estates. Ouch. Sam had been through his own messy divorce 5 years back. He understood the particular sting of being replaced by an upgrade. "You okay?" "I'm fantastic. Locked her out of everything about an hour ago." "Jesus, Holden, that's—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Efficient. She wanted to handle this like adults. Adults pay their own bills." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the after-work crowd filter in. Murphy's drew the same crowd every night. Construction workers, fishermen, a few office types who preferred beer to wine bars, people who understood that sometimes life handed you situations that required more than talking through your feelings. "Holden?" I turned toward the voice and nearly choked on my beer. Isla Corvin stood beside our table, looking nothing like the last time I'd seen her at Christmas dinner. Gone was the conservative dress and careful makeup Veda always insisted on for family gatherings. Instead, she wore jeans and a paint-stained sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked intentional. "Isla, didn't expect to see you here. Mind if I sit? I promise I'm not here as Veda's spy or anything dramatic like that." Sam raised his eyebrows at me. I nodded toward the empty chair. "Sam, this is Isla, Veda's sister." "Isla, Sam." She shook his hand and settled into the chair like she belonged there. "I heard about what happened. Well, I heard Veda's version, which I'm guessing bears about as much resemblance to reality as her Instagram posts do to her actual life." That got my attention. "What's Veda's version?" "You're having a midlife crisis and refused to work on the marriage. She tried everything to save it, but you've become impossible to live with. Very tragic, very noble of her to finally give up and move on." "And you believe that?" Isla laughed, a sound with sharp edges. "I've known my sister for 28 years. She's never tried to save anything in her life unless it benefited her directly." She paused, studying my face. "Plus, she's been bragging about her new boyfriend for months. Lachlan something. Trust fund guy who thinks buying art makes him interesting." The pieces clicked together. "You own the gallery downtown, Corvin Arts." "Guilty. And Lachlan has been sniffing around there, trying to impress Veda by pretending he understands modern sculpture." She made a face like she'd tasted something sour. "He bought a $3,000 piece last month and asked if it came with a certificate of authenticity. It was a coat rack." Sam snorted into his beer. Sounds like a real intellectual. "Oh, he's brilliant. Asked me if I had anything more accessible for his penthouse. Apparently, abstract art confuses his dinner guests." I was starting to understand why Veda always complained about Isla being the family disappointment. Anyone who could see through Veda's performance, this clearly would be a threat to the carefully constructed image my ex-wife had spent years building. "So what brings you to Murphy's?" I'm guessing it's not the ambiance. "I wanted to talk to you before the family reunion next month. Veda's planning to bring Lachlan as her date." The reunion. I'd completely forgotten about the annual Corvin family gathering, held every September at the family estate. 3 generations of Corvins, their spouses, and enough family drama to fuel a soap opera for a year. I'm not exactly invited anymore. Actually, you are. Mom and Dad don't know about the separation yet. Veda's been telling them you're working late on a big project and can't make it to family dinners. Of course she has. Isla leaned forward, her voice dropping. She's planning to introduce Lachlan as a friend of the family, let everyone get to know him, then announce that you two are getting divorced and she's found someone who appreciates her. Sounds like Veda. Always did love an audience. Here's the thing, though. She's also been telling people that I'm jealous of her relationship and trying to sabotage it. Apparently, I've been throwing myself at Lachlan and making everyone uncomfortable. Sam and I exchanged glances. Why would she do that? Because last month I told her that her boyfriend was an idiot and she could do better. She didn't take it well. Isla's smile had a predatory quality that reminded me of her sister, but sharper. Also because she knows I found out about the money. What money? The money she's been skimming from the family trust. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger an audit, but enough to fund her new lifestyle. Spa treatments, expensive dinners, that condo deposit. The conversation had just taken an interesting turn. How do you know about this? I help Mom with the books sometimes. Noticed some irregularities, did some digging. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through a series of screenshots. Bank transfers, credit card payments, cash withdrawals, all authorized by her signature as a trust beneficiary, all for personal expenses that have nothing to do with trust business. I studied the numbers on her screen. Thousands of dollars over the past 6 months, all coinciding with the timeline Sam had given me about Veda's mysterious dinner companion. Why are you telling me this? Because my sister has spent the last 5 years making my life miserable, and I'm tired of it. She convinced my parents that my gallery was a waste of money and I should get a real job. She told everyone I was going through a phase and would settle down eventually. She's been systematically undermining me at every family gathering, and now she's setting me up to look like the jealous sister who can't stand to see her happy. Isla's voice had an edge that suggested this went deeper than sibling rivalry. Plus, she's stealing from the family, planning to humiliate you at the reunion, and generally being the same manipulative person she's always been. I figured it was time someone called her on it. What did you have in mind? I was thinking we could call her bluff. You show up to the reunion, preferably with a date who makes Lachlan look like the pretentious fool he is. I provide the financial records that prove she's been stealing. We let her explain herself in front of the whole family. Sam was grinning now. I like her. It's not that simple, I said. Veda's good at spinning stories. She'll find a way to make herself look like the victim. Not if we control the narrative. Isla's eyes had a calculating look that was definitely a family trait. Trust me, I've been watching her manipulate people for years. I know how she thinks. I finished my beer, considering the offer. Veda had orchestrated her exit like a corporate takeover, efficient and ruthless. She'd left me with the bills, the explanations, and the humiliation of being the husband who couldn't keep his wife satisfied. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her sister. What do you get out of this? Revenge. And maybe the chance to finally show my family who Veda really is. She paused. Plus, if I'm being honest, I always liked you better than her anyway. Sam raised his glass. To new alliances. Isla clinked her glass against his, then looked at me expectantly. So, are you in? I thought about the note on my kitchen table, the empty wine bottle, and the casual cruelty of being reduced to an arrangement that needed exploring. Veda wanted to play games with my life? Fine, but she'd forgotten that I knew all her rules. Time to change them. I'm in. The next morning brought 3 missed calls from Veda and a text message that could have been written by her lawyer. We need to discuss the financial situation immediately. This is childish. Childish. That was rich. coming from someone who'd celebrated her separation with my anniversary wine and left me a note like we were college roommates arguing over dish duty. I was measuring lumber at the Henderson site when my phone rang again. This time I answered. Holden, thank God, we need to talk. Good morning to you too, Veda. How's the new arrangement working out? Don't be sarcastic. You locked me out of our accounts. I secured my accounts. There's a difference. Our accounts, Holden. We built those together. Funny how they became our accounts the minute you couldn't access them. When you were transferring money to pay for your boyfriend's dinners, they seemed pretty much like your accounts. Silence on the other end. Veda was recalculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Harborview Estates. I know about the credit card statements. I know about the trust fund withdrawals. I let that sink in. Want to keep pretending this is about needing space? We should meet somewhere and discuss this rationally. Rationally, like adults, right? I could hear traffic in the background, which meant she was calling from her car. Probably parked outside our house, discovering that the spare key no longer worked. Here's a rational discussion. You left me for another man, tried to stick me with all our joint expenses, and stole money from your family to fund your new lifestyle. Did I miss anything? It's not that simple. It never is with you. Another pause. When Veda spoke again, her voice had that dangerous calm she used when she was planning something unpleasant. I'm willing to be reasonable about the division of assets, but you can't just freeze me out. I have rights. So do I. Funny how that works. Holden, I'm trying to handle this maturely. By bringing your boyfriend to the family reunion? The silence stretched longer this time. Veda was realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart faster than she'd anticipated. Who told you that? Does it matter? The point is, you've been planning this whole thing like some kind of corporate presentation, exit strategy, new relationship, family announcement. Very thorough. It's not like that. Then what's it like, Veda? Help me understand how abandoning your husband for a trust fund brat constitutes mature behavior. I didn't abandon you. I tried to make this work for years. By lying to me? By stealing money? By screwing around behind my back? I never. She stopped herself, probably realizing that denying the obvious would only make things worse. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You want access to the accounts? We'll discuss it through lawyers. You want to bring your boyfriend to family events? That's between you and your parents. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. You're being vindictive. I'm being realistic. You wanted to end this marriage, congratulations. But you don't get to control how I respond to being abandoned. I hung up before she could answer and went back to measuring lumber. The Henderson project was a complete renovation, tearing down walls and rebuilding the structure from the inside out. Sometimes that was the only way to fix something that had been built wrong the first place. My phone buzzed with a text from Isla. Coffee? I have updates. 20 minutes later, I found her at the corner cafe, laptop open and surrounded by papers that looked suspiciously like financial records. Busy morning? I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Productive morning. I've been doing some research on your wife's boyfriend. Ex-wife. Right, ex-wife. She turned her laptop around so I could see the screen. Meet Lachlan Haynes, heir to the Haynes industrial fortune and professional disappointment to his family. The photo showed a man in his 30s with the kind of carefully casual appearance that cost serious money to achieve. Expensive haircut, designer clothes that looked like they'd never been worn for actual work, and the confident smile of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Impressive resume, I said, scanning the article. Trust fund, expensive education, series of failed business ventures funded by daddy's money. Gets better. He's currently between jobs, which is a polite way of saying he got fired from his last position for inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Meaning? Meaning he has a pattern of dating women who work for him, then making their lives miserable when the relationships end. 3 harassment settlements in the past 5 years, all quietly handled by the family lawyers. I studied the screen more carefully. Where did you get this information? I have friends in the art world. Lachlan's been making the rounds of galleries for months, trying to establish himself as a serious collector. Word gets around about buyers who cause problems. And Veda knows about this? Doubtful. She's not exactly thorough when it comes to research. Remember when she bought that car without checking the maintenance records? Or when she booked that vacation rental that turned out to be a timeshare presentation? I did remember. Veda had a talent for making decisions based on surface impressions and expecting other people to handle the details. It was one of the things that had driven me crazy during our marriage. So what's the plan? Isla closed her laptop and leaned forward. I'm thinking we let her introduce him to the family, let everyone get to know him, then provide some context about his background. Nothing illegal, just public information that might interest people who care about family reputation. The Corvins do love their reputation. Exactly. Plus, I've been thinking about your situation. You need a date for the reunion, someone who makes Veda's choice look questionable by comparison. I'm not really in the dating market right now. I'm not talking about dating. I'm talking about making a statement. She paused, studying my face. What if you brought me? The suggestion caught me off guard. You want to be my date to your own family reunion? Think about it. Veda's been telling everyone that I'm jealous of her relationship and trying to sabotage it. If I show up as your date, it proves that I'm not pining after her boyfriend. Plus, it puts her in the awkward position of explaining why her sister is dating her ex-husband. I considered the implications. Actually, pretty brilliant. I have my moments. And honestly, spending the evening with someone intelligent would be a nice change from watching Lachlan explain art to people who actually understand it. What about your family? They might not appreciate the drama. My family thrives on drama. They just prefer it to be the kind they can gossip about for months afterward. She grinned. Besides, Veda started this game. I'm just suggesting we play it better than she does. My phone buzzed with another call from Veda. I declined it and looked at Isla, who was watching me with the same calculating expression I'd seen the night before. You really want to do this? I really want to watch my sister try to explain herself when her perfect plan falls apart in front of everyone who matters to her. And if it backfires? Then we'll deal with the consequences, but at least we'll have tried. She extended her hand across the table. Partners? I shook her hand, noting that her grip was firm and her eyes were steady. Veda had always described her sister as flighty and unreliable, but the woman sitting across from me seemed anything but. Partners. But I have one condition. Name it. When this is over, we're even. No expectations, no complications. Agreed. She paused. Though I reserve the right to enjoy myself in the process. Wouldn't want it any other way. As I drove back to the job site, I found myself looking forward to the reunion for the first time in years. Veda thought she had everything figured out, her exit strategy planned down to the last detail. She'd forgotten that the best plans only work when the other players follow the script. Time to improvise. The Henderson renovation was the kind of project that reminded me why I loved construction work. The house had good bones, solid foundation, but decades of poor decisions had left it structurally unsound. Walls built in the wrong places, load-bearing beams removed by previous owners who didn't understand what they were supporting. It was a metaphor so obvious, it hurt. You're awfully cheerful for a guy whose wife just left him, Tommy Martinez observed, watching me tear down a wall that had been blocking natural light for 30 years. Ex-wife, and maybe I'm just looking forward to the renovation. The house or your life? Both. Tommy had been working construction longer than I'd been alive, and he had the kind of practical wisdom that came from watching people make the same mistakes over and over. Divorce is expensive, you know. Might want to think about that before you get too carried away with the revenge fantasies. Who said anything about revenge? Nobody has to say it. It's written all over your face. He handed me a crowbar. Just remember, when you're tearing down walls, you better be sure you're not bringing down the whole structure. Good advice, but Tommy didn't know Veda like I did. She'd built her entire life on appearances, carefully constructed facades that looked impressive from the outside, but had no real substance behind them. The trick wasn't tearing down walls, it was showing people what was already there. My phone rang around lunchtime. Unknown number, which usually meant a potential client or someone trying to sell me something. Holden Ravel. Mr. Ravel, this is Derek Chen. I work with Veda at Morrison Marketing. She asked me to call you. Derek. I remembered him from company parties, the kind of guy who always knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. If Veda was sending him to negotiate, she was either desperate or planning something. What can I do for you, Derek? Look, I know this is awkward, but Veda's really struggling with this whole situation. She's been crying at work, can barely focus on her projects. I think she's realizing she made a mistake. Is that right? She's too proud to call you herself, but I think if you reached out, maybe suggested counseling or something, she'd be open to working things out. I walked away from the job site, not wanting Tommy and the crew to overhear this conversation. Derek, I appreciate you trying to help, but I don't think you have the whole story. I know she moved out, and I know you're both hurting. Sometimes people do stupid things when they're unhappy, but that doesn't mean the marriage is over. What did she tell you, exactly? That you two have been having problems for months, that she needed some space to figure things out, and that you reacted by cutting off her access to money and changing the locks. She's staying with friends because she can't afford her own place. Friends. Interesting way to describe Lachlan. Derek, did she mention why she needed space? She said you've been distant, working all the time, not communicating. Classic midlife stuff happens to lots of couples. And did she mention that she's been seeing someone else for months? Silence on the other end. Derek was recalculating, probably wondering how much Veda had left out of her sob story. She didn't mention that specifically. How about the money she's been taking from her family's trust fund to pay for dinners and hotel rooms? Look, I don't know anything about that. I just know she's miserable, and she's miserable because her plan didn't work out the way she expected. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too, keep the financial security of marriage while exploring other options. When I didn't play along, suddenly I became the bad guy. Maybe you could just talk to her, work something out. We tried talking, Derek. That's how I found out about her arrangement with the trust fund guy. But I appreciate you calling. I hung up before he could respond and went back to tearing down walls. Veda was mobilizing her support network, trying to control the narrative before it got away from her. The crying at work performance was classic Veda, designed to generate sympathy and make her look like the victim. But sending Derek to negotiate suggested she was worried about something. Maybe Isla's threat about the family reunion was having an effect. That afternoon, I drove downtown to Corvin Arts. Isla's gallery occupied a converted warehouse space, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that showcased the artwork without overwhelming it. The pieces on display were challenging, thought-provoking stuff that required actual engagement rather than passive consumption. No coat racks masquerading as sculpture, in other words. Holden! Isla emerged from the back office, paint-stained apron over dark jeans and a smile that seemed genuinely pleased to see me. Perfect timing. I just got off the phone with my mother. How did that go? Interesting. Apparently Veda called her this morning, very upset about some financial misunderstanding between you two. She wanted Mom to talk to you about being reasonable. And your mother said? That marriage problem should be handled between spouses, not through family intermediaries. Mom's old-fashioned that way. Isla's smile had a sharp edge. But she did mention that she's looking forward to seeing you at the reunion. Veda didn't tell her about the separation? Nope. still sticking to the story that you're working too much to attend family events. Which means she's planning to spring the whole thing on everyone at once. The separation, the new boyfriend, probably some story about how you've been impossible to live with. I walked around the gallery, studying the paintings and sculptures. Everything was carefully curated, professionally displayed, the work of someone who understood both art and business. Your sister always said you weren't practical enough to run a successful gallery. My sister says a lot of things. Most of them are designed to make herself feel better about her own choices. Isla joined me in front of a large abstract painting, all bold colors and dynamic movement. She's never understood that there's a difference between being practical and being calculating. What's the difference? Practical people solve problems. Calculating people create problems for other people to solve. She glanced at me sideways. Which category do you think your ex-wife falls into? Definitely the second one. So we're still on for the reunion? Absolutely. Though I should warn you, Derek from her office called today. She's building a narrative about being the wronged party in all this. Of course she is. Veda's never met a situation she couldn't reframe to her advantage. Isla walked over to her desk and pulled out a folder, which is why I've been doing some more research. The folder contained printouts of bank statements, credit card records, and what looked like correspondence between Veda and various businesses. All legal, all obtained through legitimate channels, all painting a picture of someone living well beyond her means. How did you get all this? I'm a trust beneficiary too, remember? I have access to the same records Veda does. I just pay attention to what they actually say. She flipped through the pages. Look at this pattern. Every time she makes a withdrawal from the trust, there's a corresponding charge at an expensive restaurant or hotel. Always for 2 people, always on weekends. Going back how far? 6 months, right around the time Derek said she started having marriage problems. The timeline was damning. While Veda was telling me we needed to work on our communication, she was systematically planning her exit strategy and funding it with stolen money. This is enough to get her removed as a trust beneficiary. It's enough to destroy her reputation with the family, which matters more to Veda than money. Isla closed the folder. The question is, how do we want to use it? Carefully. If we come on too strong, she'll find a way to make us look vindictive. Agreed. Better to let her hang herself with her own rope. Isla leaned against her desk, studying my face. You're really okay with this? Making your private business public? She made it public when she decided to bring her boyfriend to the family reunion. I'm just making sure people have all the facts. And you're okay with people thinking you're dating your ex-wife's sister? Are you okay with people thinking you're dating your sister's ex-husband? I'm okay with people thinking I'm dating someone who treats me like an equal instead of an accessory. She paused. Plus, it'll drive Veda absolutely crazy, which is a nice bonus. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? We spent the next hour planning our strategy for the reunion. Nothing illegal, nothing that could backfire, just a carefully orchestrated presentation of facts that would let people draw their own conclusions. By the time I left the gallery, I was feeling better about the situation than I had since finding Veda's note. She'd started this game thinking she held all the cards, but she'd forgotten that other people could learn to play too. The reunion was still 2 weeks away, but I was already looking forward to it. 2 days before the reunion, Veda made her final play. I was finishing up paperwork at the Henderson site when she appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about successful professional women. Designer dress, perfect makeup, the kind of confident smile she wore to client presentations. Hello, Holden. Veda, this is unexpected. We need to talk. I thought we were handling everything through lawyers. Some things are too important for lawyers. She stepped into the trailer, uninvited, and closed the door behind her. I've been thinking about what you said, about handling this maturely. Have you now? I made mistakes, I can admit that. But so did you, and I think we're both letting pride get in the way of fixing this. She sat down across from my desk, crossing her legs in that deliberate way that used to distract me during arguments. Old habits, apparently. What kind of mistakes are we talking about, Veda? I should have talked to you before I moved out. Should have been honest about feeling disconnected from our marriage. Should have suggested counseling instead of just leaving. And you should have tried harder to understand why I was unhappy instead of just assuming everything was fine. Classic Veda. Even her apologies came with conditions and shared blame. What about Lachlan? What about him? Are you planning to keep seeing him? She hesitated, probably calculating how much honesty the situation required. He's been a good friend during a difficult time, but if we're going to work on our marriage, obviously that would have to change. Obviously. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we built something together, Holden. 15 years doesn't just disappear because we hit a rough patch. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Veda was good at reading people, but she'd never been good at reading me. She was playing this like a business negotiation, offering concessions in exchange for cooperation. What do you want, Veda? I want us to try. Real counseling, honest communication, a genuine effort to rebuild what we had. And if I say no? Then we proceed with the divorce, and I hope we can at least be civil about it. Civil, like bringing your boyfriend to the family reunion? Her composure slipped for just a moment. How did you know about that? Lucky guess. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Lachlan is coming as my friend. I thought it would be easier than explaining the separation to everyone at once. Easier for who? For everyone. Family gatherings are complicated enough without adding drama. So your plan is to introduce him as a friend, let everyone get comfortable with him, then announce that we're getting divorced and you've found someone new? It's not that calculated. Everything you do is calculated, Veda. It's one of your best qualities, professionally speaking. She stood up, smoothing her dress. I came here hoping we could find a way forward that doesn't hurt either of us unnecessarily. But if you're determined to be vindictive, I'm determined to be honest. There's a difference. Honest about what? About why our marriage really ended. About the money you've been taking from the family trust. About the fact that you've been planning this for months while pretending to care about working things out. The mask slipped completely this time. Veda's carefully controlled expression gave way to something harder, more calculating. You don't know what you're talking about. Bank records suggest otherwise. Those are legitimate trust distributions. For personal expenses that have nothing to do with trust business. Dinners, hotels, gifts for your new boyfriend. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Dates, amounts, corresponding credit card charges, very thorough documentation. She was quiet for a long moment, probably running through her options and realizing they were all bad. What do you want? I want you to stop lying. To me? To your family? To yourself? And if I don't? Then Sunday's reunion is going to be very interesting. She moved toward the door, then stopped. You know, I used to think you were too decent to play these kinds of games. I used to think you were too smart to get caught. This isn't over, Holden. No, it's not, but it's going to end Sunday night, one way or another. After she left, I sat in the trailer for a long time thinking about the conversation. Veda had come here expecting to manipulate me into cooperation, offering just enough concessions to make me back down from whatever I was planning. She'd left knowing that her carefully constructed plan was about to collapse in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to her. My phone buzzed with a text from Isla. Veda just called Mom. Emergency family meeting tonight. She's bringing Lachlan to introduce him before the reunion. I typed back, change of strategy? Panic. She knows something's wrong but doesn't know how much we know. Are you ready for this? Are you? I looked around the construction trailer at the blueprints and work orders and all the evidence of projects completed and problems solved. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never felt as clear about anything as I did right now. I'm ready. The next 24 hours were going to change everything. Veda had spent months planning her perfect exit, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated everyone around her. Tomorrow night she was going to learn the difference between being smart and being wise. The Corvin family estate sat on 10 acres of manicured lawn overlooking the harbor, the kind of old money property that spoke of generations of careful investment and social positioning. I'd been coming to these reunions for 15 years, always as Veda's husband, always slightly outside the family circle. Tonight felt different. "You clean up nice," Isla said as I walked up the front steps. She wore a midnight blue dress that managed to be both elegant and slightly rebellious, her dark hair swept up to show off earrings that caught the light. "You don't look too bad yourself." High praise from a construction worker. Former construction worker. "Tonight, I'm your date. How do you feel about that?" "Like I'm about to find out how the other half lives." She laughed and took my arm. "Trust me, they're not that different from anyone else. They just have better lawyers." The front hall was already crowded with Corvins of various generations, all dressed in the kind of understated expensive clothes that whispered rather than shouted about money. I recognized most of them from previous gatherings, aunts and uncles, cousins, family friends who'd been adopted into the clan over the years. "Holden!" Mrs. Corvin appeared at my elbow, elegant and sharp-eyed as always. "What a lovely surprise. Veda said you were too busy with work to join us." I managed to rearrange my schedule. "And Isla, dear, you look beautiful. Are you two?" She gestured between us with the kind of delicate inquiry that wealthy families had perfected over generations. "We're exploring new arrangements," Isla said, echoing Veda's phrase with just enough emphasis to make it interesting. Mrs. Corvin's eyebrows rose slightly. "How modern of you." Before she could ask follow-up questions, a commotion near the front door announced the arrival of the evening's other guests. Veda swept in, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, followed by a man who could only be Lachlan Haynes. He looked exactly like his photos, expensively groomed, confidently casual, the kind of man who'd never doubted his place in the world. He wore his wealth like a comfortable sweater, obvious but not ostentatious. "Everyone," Veda announced, her voice carrying across the room, "I'd like you to meet Lachlan Haynes. He's been a wonderful friend during some difficult times." The family gathered around them with the kind of polite interest that masked intense curiosity. Lachlan handled the introduction smoothly, mentioning his family's business, his interest in art, his appreciation for being included in such a warm gathering. He was good at this, I had to admit. Charming without being oily, confident without being arrogant. If you didn't know about the harassment settlements and the pattern of predatory relationships, you'd probably like him. "Holden." Veda had spotted me across the room, her carefully composed expression flickering with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here. Last-minute change of plans." I walked over with Isla, still on my arm. "Lachlan, right? I'm Holden, Veda's husband." "Ex-husband," Veda corrected quickly. "Soon-to-be ex-husband," I corrected back. "The paperwork's not final yet." Lachlan extended his hand with the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd handled awkward situations before. "Nice to meet you, Holden. Veda's told me a lot about you." "I'm sure she has. All good things, I hope." "Of course. And you know Isla, obviously." "We've met." Lachlan's smile tightened slightly. "At the gallery." "Lachlan's quite the art collector," Isla said. "Very discerning taste." "I try to support local artists when I can." "How generous of you." The conversation had the polite, dangerous quality of a sword fight conducted with butter knives. Everyone was smiling, everyone was civil, and everyone knew that something was happening beneath the surface. Mrs. Corvin appeared beside us with the timing of someone who'd been watching the interaction carefully. "Dinner's ready. Shall we?" The dining room could seat 20 comfortably, with a view of the harbor that had probably inspired 1,000 family toasts over the years. I found myself seated between Isla and Uncle Robert, directly across from Veda and Lachlan. Perfect positioning for what was about to happen. Dinner conversation flowed around the usual topics: family news, business updates, local politics. Lachlan contributed appropriately, demonstrating the kind of broad but shallow knowledge that came from expensive education and careful reading of the right publications. He was winning them over, I realized. The family was warming to him, asking about his interests, his background, his plans. By the time the main course arrived, he'd established himself as exactly the kind of man the Corvins would approve of for their daughter, which made what happened next even more effective. "Lachlan," Uncle Robert said, "Isla mentioned you're interested in modern sculpture. Are you familiar with the Brennan exhibition at the Portland Museum?" "I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I've heard wonderful things. You should go with Isla. She has an excellent eye for emerging artists." "I'd love that, actually. Though I should mention, I'll probably be traveling quite a bit in the coming months. Some business complications that need to be resolved." Isla and I exchanged glances. Time for Act 2. "What kind of business complications?" I asked. "Oh, nothing too serious. Just some personnel issues at my last company that need to be wrapped up." "Personnel issues can be tricky," Isla observed, "especially when they involve legal settlements." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Lachlan's smile became more fixed, and Veda shot her sister a warning look. "I'm not sure what you mean," Lachlan said. "Just that employment law is so complex these days. All those regulations about workplace relationships and harassment policies." "Isla," Veda's voice carried a clear warning. "I'm just making conversation, sister dear. Lachlan seems like the kind of man who'd be very careful about those things." Mrs. Corvin was watching the exchange with the sharp attention of someone who sensed family drama developing. "Is there something we should know about?" "Not at all," Lachlan said quickly. "Just some routine business matters." "Routine," I repeated. "Like the 3 settlements your family lawyers handled in the past 5 years?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sound of silverware stopped as everyone turned to stare at Lachlan, whose confident expression was rapidly dissolving. "I don't know where you're getting your information," he said, "but—" "Public records," Isla said helpfully. "Amazing what you can find when you know where to look." "This is inappropriate," Veda snapped. "We're guests here." "Actually, you're family," Mrs. Corvin said quietly, "and family has a right to know who they're welcoming into their home." "There's been a misunderstanding," Lachlan started. "3 misunderstandings," I corrected. "All involving women who worked for you, all resolved with confidential settlements, all handled quietly to avoid publicity." "That's enough!" Veda stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is a setup." "This is a conversation," Isla said calmly. "The kind we should have had before you brought a man with a history of predatory behavior into our family home." "Predatory behavior?" Mrs. Corvin's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "I think we should go," Lachlan said, pushing back from the table. "I think you should explain yourself." Mr. Corvin spoke for the first time since the conversation had taken its turn. "These are serious allegations." "They're lies," Veda said desperately. "They're trying to sabotage my relationship because they can't stand to see me happy." "Are they lies, Lachlan?" Uncle Robert asked. Lachlan looked around the table, probably calculating whether he could salvage the situation, or if retreat was the better option. "The settlements were precautionary measures, standard business practice to avoid litigation." 3 precautionary measures, Isla observed. "This is ridiculous," Veda said. "You're all acting like he's some kind of criminal." "We're acting like people who care about family reputation," Mrs. Corvin said coldly. "Something you might want to consider." "My reputation? What about the money Holden's been hiding from me? What about the way he's turned my own sister against me? Speaking of money, I said, pulling out the folder Isla had prepared, let's talk about the trust fund withdrawals. Veda went very still. What? 6 months of unauthorized distributions, thousands of dollars used for personal expenses that had nothing to do with trust business. I spread the papers across the table. Dinners, hotels, gifts, all coinciding with your relationship with Lachlan. Those were legitimate distributions. For what purpose? Trust business. What trust business involves dinner for two at Harborview Restaurant every Friday night for 6 months? The family was staring at her now with the same attention they'd given Lachlan moments before. Mrs. Corvin picked up one of the bank statements, studying it with the careful attention of someone who understood numbers. Veda, she said quietly, is this accurate? I can explain. Please do. But Veda couldn't explain, because there was no explanation that didn't involve admitting she'd been stealing from the family to fund her affair. She looked around the table, probably hoping for support from someone, anyone. She found none. This is all very enlightening, Mr. Corvin said finally, but I think we've heard enough. Daddy, please. Enough. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Lachlan, I think it would be best if you left. Of course. I apologize for any misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. There's just information we didn't have before tonight. Lachlan stood up, his composure finally cracking. This is insane. You people are insane. And you're no longer welcome in our home, Mrs. Corvin said with icy politeness. After he left, the family sat in uncomfortable silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Veda remained standing, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. I hope you're all satisfied, she said finally. We're disappointed, her father replied. There's a difference. Disappointed in me? What about them? She gestured toward Isla and me. They orchestrated this whole thing. We provided information, Isla said calmly. You provided the behavior that made it relevant. You're supposed to be my sister. I am your sister. That's why I couldn't watch you make a fool of yourself in front of the whole family. By bringing a man I care about to a family gathering? By bringing a predator who's using you, stealing money to impress him, and lying to everyone about your marriage? Veda looked around the table one more time, searching for allies. Finding none, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, she said. Yes, I replied. It is. After she left, the family sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Mrs. Corvin spoke. Well, she said, that was illuminating. I'm sorry you had to see that, Isla said. Don't apologize for telling the truth, though I do wish we'd known about this sooner. We wanted to be sure of our facts. And now we are. Mr. Corvin looked at me. Holden, I owe you an apology. We should have realized what was happening. It's not your fault. Veda's very good at managing perceptions. Not as good as she thinks, apparently. Uncle Robert raised his wine glass. To family, he said. The kind that tells you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. To family, the table echoed. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the terrace with Isla, looking out over the harbor. The lights of the town twinkled below us, peaceful and distant. So, she said, how do you feel? Like I just watched 15 years of my life get dissected in front of an audience. Regrets? I thought about it. No, she made her choices. Tonight just made them public. And what happens now? Now we move on. Both of us. She was quiet for a moment. Holden? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you handled that perfectly. We handled it perfectly. Does that mean we're still partners? I looked at her. This woman who'd helped me reclaim my life from someone who'd tried to steal it. I think we're whatever we want to be. I like the sound of that. As we walked back toward the house, I realized that for the first time in months I wasn't thinking about Veda at all. I was thinking about possibilities, about new beginnings, about what came next. The reunion was over. The real story was just beginning.